Alright guys, so this week I have been testing this 2018 Toyota Land Cruiser. I've put quite a bit of mileage on it, about 700 miles in the last 7 days, and I wanted to kind of sum up my experience with this. It's been quite a nice vehicle to drive. I've driven it on a road trip, a lot of highway miles, driven it in the city, on some country back roads, in torrential downpour rains, and it has exceeded my expectations in every situation. It's not cheap. This is an $85,000 Land Cruiser, pretty much the base price for these. The very similar but more luxuriously appointed Lexus LX 570 is about the same price, maybe even about $5,000 more depending on how you spec it. This Land Cruiser, though, the first thing you should know, this is an overbuilt tank. It feels so solid. It rides amazing. The engine and the transmission are fantastic. But this is a little bit more of a basic, bare bones, back to roots SUV. You drive in this and you feel like it's going to last forever. You feel like nothing can really phase it. And chances are that's probably how your ownership experience is going to be with one of these. So let's get into what this is like to live with and what it's been like to drive these past few days. First thing you'll notice getting out of the car, super solid feeling door. Everything in this truck feels solid. It feels weighty. It's nice. The steering is heavy. Aesthetically, I like this newer design language. They've changed the front grille. They've done a few little changes here. I think it's better proportioned. I don't think this is the best looking Land Cruiser by far. Personally, I think these rear taillights are still a little bit large for the proportions of the vehicle, but that's how it's always been with this 200 series Land Cruiser. One really nice feature that I've enjoyed this week is the split folding rear tailgate. So if you just want to throw some items in the back, you don't have to pull this down. This gives you kind of a protective layer and also just a gauge of how far you can place things in the back. This is a really solid platform. You can put a ton of weight on this, use it as a bench, a table. There's also some tools and things in here. Place to store some extra things that you want to put in the back of your Land Cruiser. And of course you've got the third row of seats back here as well. Let's look at those. So you just pull this lever to fold these down. Really easy to put up. And actually while we're here, let's look at what it's like to sit in the back. All of this is mechanical. There's very little in this new Land Cruiser that feels like it's going to break over time. There's not a lot of tech. There's not a lot of features. It feels pretty solid and pretty future-proof. It's a simpler machine, but I think in the long run, if you're using this for its intended purpose, so to get in the back seat, just fold these, one lever folds these seats forward. You've got a decent amount of room back here in a pinch. I don't think this is a space that you'd be too comfortable in for a long trip. But at 5'10", I can fit back here relatively comfortably. You even have a little bit of space behind this third row to store things. Now how do I get out? There we go. Oh my gosh. All right, let's look at the back seats here too. So, as you can see, there's a ton of room back here. This step, a lot of other reviewers have mentioned this. This step is a little bit thin, a little bit narrow, but I've never really had trouble slipping off of it this week. You can put your foot like this, you can put your foot like this, and it always seems to be wide, just wide enough. Tons of legroom and space in the back seat, as you'd imagine. Pretty nice, open, airy cabin. This Land Cruiser has great visibility. A little bit of storage here, some cup holders. Rear climate control with heated seats. And you even have a 12-volt, 120-watt cigarette lighter port. All right, so let's take this thing for a drive. I think we've got pretty good idea of what it's like in the interior. I do really like this color combination. You've got a nice reverse camera, pretty standard in Toyota's lineup. You've got a above 360 view, as well as a backwards camera with moving lines. And you can see ahead of you if you really want to as well. Pretty good visibility in this SUV. At low speeds, the steering is a little bit heavier than I was going to expect. It's not quite like my Lexus GX where everything is so light and easy to the touch. The driving position is really nice. The seats are okay. I had a little bit of discomfort on the long trip this week, but that could maybe just because my back has been messed up the last few weeks. The highlights of this truck are the ride quality and the drivetrain. So this new 8-speed transmission with this 5.7 liter V8 is a really, really good combination. The transmission is so smooth. When you're driving around normally, you barely even feel any shift. It's pretty amazing. The suspension seems to soak up bumps better than just about any other SUV that I've driven. There isn't any fancy wizardry or trickery here. There's no hydraulics. There's no air suspension. This is just standard coil setup. And the LX has this hydraulic system that can raise and lower, and it's a complicated system. It's nice and it rides well, but this is just simple and it rides incredibly well. You still have the hydraulic sway bars that are pretty typical to most Toyotas, like the 4Runner and the FJ and the GX, and those are pretty bulletproof for off-roading, as well as slightly better on-road handling. But the way this truck rides over potholes and road imperfections, it's so well controlled. There's not a lot of float, there's no body motion, it just kind of smooths everything out. Brakes feel pretty normal Toyota truck, very similar to the 4Runner, Tacoma, Tundra, stuff like that. You've got kind of this little swoosh at the top of the pedal and then pretty decent bite from there on. Really, really impressed with this transmission. Like I said earlier, you barely feel the shifts. It's pretty responsive when you need it to be. You put your foot down, it'll give you a gear pretty much immediately. You do have a setting to go over here and shift manually yourself if you choose to. Once we get out of some traffic here, I'll show you guys the handling, but this actually handles pretty well for its size. I believe this is a 5,800 pound SUV, and for that weight, it does all right. Towing capacity is around 8,100 pounds, and I believe this has 381 horsepower, 401 pound-feet of torque. The numbers would lead you to believe that this wouldn't be too quick, but it actually has a ton of punch. It's pretty impressive. One thing I did get a chance to test a lot on my road trip was just how well the radar-guided cruise control works. This is a pretty nice system. There's no abrupt braking, there's no real lag in changing lanes and accelerating and matching the speed with traffic. It works really well, and I found it very useful on a long drive. Fuel economy was about what you'd expect. I've averaged about 14.6 miles to the gallon in the combined cycle between a lot of highway driving and city driving. I think if you're doing mostly city, you're probably going to be averaging closer to 12 or 13. On the highway, I was able to get about 19 miles to the gallon on the readout, going about 70, 75 miles an hour. A little bit of a tire squeal there, but this has actually pretty impressive balance and road manners at the limit. We're able to hold about 50 miles an hour around this entrance ramp. And plenty of pull up to speed 5.7 liter V8. Also really impressed with the level of NVH in this car. Wind noise is super minimal, very little cabin intrusion at higher speeds. It feels really solid at higher highway speeds. For such a not very aerodynamic vehicle, it's really, really solid on the road. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that I haven't really had a chance to test this off-road this week. It's been mostly an on-road driving experience for me in this Land Cruiser, but I'm sure it's incredibly capable. Really, the only limiting factor with these Land Cruisers is their ground clearance. You have a 30-degree front end approach angle, but your departure angle is only 20 degrees, and you're a little bit limited in that respect. If you're going to be off-roading, overlanding, doing anything like that, you're probably going to be wanting to put on some tougher steel bumpers on the front and the back, or even just going with a suspension lift. That said, right out of the box, these things are incredibly capable and really can hold their own in an off-road environment. One thing that I can't really show you in this video, but I'll tell you, is the JBL sound system is phenomenal. It's absolutely fantastic. It sounds really, really good. This Land Cruiser bumps. I've been calling it the party bus because it really has a bomb sound system. I was quite impressed with how nice the clarity is, how good the depth and bass is throughout the sound range. It's a really nice system, and it sounds great in the cabin. One thing to mention too, just some livability stuff. This does not have European turn signals, so just like my BRZ, like a lot of Toyotas these days, you're really going to have to hold the turn signal for as long as you want it to go, which I think is okay. It's not really a big deal. It kind of goes back to this bare bones, old school SUV feel, and I kind of like that. If you guys want a bunch of tech in your $85,000 Land Cruiser, get an LX or get something else. But if you want something that's going to last a really long time, that feels bulletproof, and probably is on the road and on the trail, you can't really go wrong with this. And I realize that not everyone pays $85,000 for these. You can still get these LC 200 series Land Cruisers from 2010, 2011. You can get them for about 20-30 grand on the used market, which I think is a killer deal. You're getting a lot of truck for your money here, and really the only downside is fuel economy, and it's a little bit big. It's just a large vehicle on the road. When I was in the city in Pittsburgh, it was a little bit tight to maneuver through some of the tighter areas. We got through it okay. Luckily, visibility and your limits on each corner of the vehicle are easy to gauge, but it was a little bit large. It was a tight fit through some sections. Let's park this and show you guys one more walk around the vehicle. Turning radius isn't quite as good as I would like, but it's doable. You're definitely not doing a bunch of three-point turns everywhere that you need to go. Well, there you go. There's a nice test drive in the Land Cruiser. One of my favorite features of this truck, just kind of from a practicality standpoint, is I really like how you can lock and unlock the doors from the front and the back door handles. Really useful. If I want to throw something in the back seat, I don't have to go to the front door, put my hand there. I can just open the back door if the vehicle's locked and put it in. Really nice, thoughtful feature that you actually don't really see in a lot of vehicles. Alright guys, well that's it for this one. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Would I buy one of these Land Cruisers someday? Perhaps, maybe. I think honestly the fuel cost would be about the same as my GX. And comparing this to the GX, I made a video on that earlier for a night drive. If you want to know what this is like compared to the smaller Land Cruiser Prado / Lexus GX 460, I do have a video on that. It's at night. Check it out. I'll put that on the channel as well. But for now, I think this is a really solid truck. It's freaking expensive, but it's also super overbuilt. There aren't a lot of things left that you can buy these days that are this overbuilt. You know, you think about German cars in the 80s and 90s and, you know, old Volvos, and the Land Cruiser has always stayed true to its heritage in the sense that it's just a capable all-round SUV. You can fit a lot of people in it with comfort. The third row actually has a decent amount of room. There's a ton of storage inside. It's a practical and I think a very usable vehicle in a lot of situations. It's safe, it's solid, and really I like its simplicity, and I think that's probably the defining character of the Land Cruiser versus the LX and a lot of other SUVs on the market. You could call it dated, you could call it, you know, hey, this thing really needs an update, but honestly, it's usable, it's very ergonomically friendly, and there's something to be said about that. So many new vehicles are overcomplicated with technology and buttons and touchscreens that it's gotten a little bit more tedious to use them on a daily basis. Whereas this, you just hop in, you push a button, all the ergonomics are great, they're easy to use, and you can just drive this thing and it doesn't get in the way. So anyway, guys, that sums up the Land Cruiser for me and my experience this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later. Take care.